The palace gong had not finished its second strike when a palace maid slipped into the royal nursery and swapped the queen's newborn son. Her breath was steady. Her hands were not. "Sleep?" she whispered to the queen's child, laying him in a reed basket lined with blue cloth. Then she lifted another infant who was tiny, fragile, swaddled in plain cotton, and placed him in the royal cot of lion-carved wood. Outside, drums rolled for dawn. Inside, a life was moved like a bead on a string. Her name was Nkem, and she did it so her cousin, Queen Amara, would be thrown out of the palace. The kingdom of Omalicha wore wealth like sunlight. Coral beads glowed on every royal neck. Cowries winked on every guard's waist. The palace walls showed stories in brass: kings who brought rain, queens who healed famine, warriors who walked back from storms. On the morning the prince was born, the palace courts smelled of palm wine and incense, and the people danced in circles like praise made visible. Queen Amara lay in her chamber, exhausted but smiling, her hair woven into thick Bantu knots crowned with coral pins. Beside her, the midwives hummed a low song so the baby would learn peace first. The royal nurse, Igioma, checked the infant's fingers, toes, and breath. Everything was perfect. She wrapped him in a blue wrapper embroidered with cowries, placed him in the lion cot, and bowed. "What will he be called?" someone asked. The king lifted the child and spoke softly. "Ezeki, good destiny." Blessings filled the room. Only Nkem stood near the door, her eyes quiet and cunning, her heart hard and hot. Nkem was not born wicked. Wickedness is rarely born, it is sharpened. She had grown up poor in the market streets, selling pepper while dreaming of wearing silk. Her cousin, Amara, grew up in the same dust but walked with a different wind. Fate took Amara into the palace. First, as a maiden praised for her wisdom, then as a bride, then as a queen. Nkem entered as a palace maid, a shadow in sweet-smelling halls. Blood is blood, people told Nkem. If your cousin is queen, your son will shine too someday. But Nkem learned quickly that palaces have bright lamps and long shadows. She washed floors while Amara wore gold. She carried trays while Amara carried titles. When Amara showed her kindness, it felt like a sweet fruit thrown over a fence. Gratitude stung like pride in Nkem's throat. Then came the cruel whisper that hardened everything. Amara has given the king only daughters, the aunties in the weaving yard said. If she fails to give him a male heir, the council will ask the king to take a new wife. Amara laughed off the gossip. The king silenced the council. Love and loyalty preserved, but fear breeds craft. When the queen conceived again, the palace started counting moons. Old men read the stars. Old women tied red threads to their doorposts. And Nkem found her plan. If the queen birthed a girl, the council would press for the king to take a new wife. That if the queen birthed a boy, the kingdom would roar with praise. Own Nkem chose a third path, which was dark, clever, and final. She found a baby, a tiny market-born boy who had no mother and a dying father. She fed him goat milk in secret, kept him alive in the shadows of the laundry hut, and waited for the queen's labor like a hawk waiting for a field to empty. When Ezeki came into the world and the palace blew trumpets, Nkem moved like smoke. She swapped the royal son for the market child and thought she had trapped fate in her fist. Sunrise. The royal courtyard was filled with red cloth and songs of jubilation. The chief priest arrived with white chalk on his brow and a staff carved with cowries. Drummers lined the arcades. Women danced. Men beat talking drums. Kim stood among the palace maids like a neat needle in beautiful cloth. She kept her eyes low, but her ears drank every blessing like stolen wine. The priest lifted the child from the lion cot. The market child Nkem had smuggled in. "May you be a pillar and path," the priest intoned. "May your name hold the kingdom like a calabash holds water." Ezeki. Cowries rattled. Coral flashed. The king smiled at his queen. Amara reached for the child and kissed his forehead with a tremble of joy. Nkem exhaled one long and quiet breath. But fate does not sleep when called by false names. The true Ezeki lay in a reed basket behind the nursery, wrapped in blue cloth, a cowrie charm tied to his ankle, the one Ijeoma had tied. Beside him, Nkem had tucked a bottle of milk, a tiny cloth, and a small gourd. Her plan was to smuggle him out at first light, pass him to a paid woman outside the eastern gate, and hide him in a distant village until what? Until the queen fell and Nkem rose? Until the king took a new wife and the palace required a fresh mother to raise a lost prince? She would decide later. Greed rarely plans beyond the next shadow. But when the royal nurse Ijeoma returned to fetch oil, she heard a faint whimper behind the nursery. "I left no child there," Ijeoma murmured, moving the cane mat aside. There he was. A second baby, sleeping, wrapped in the queen's blue cloth. She froze. She rushed to the lion cot, lifted the baby in it, checked the ankle, but there was no cowrie charm. The nurse's heart slammed like a door in a storm. She looked back at the reed basket, a cowrie charm flashing at the ankle of the hidden child. "Mother of skies," she whispered, suddenly cold. "What has been done here?" Ijeoma did not scream. She was old. Age teaches you which sounds save lives. She wrapped both babies tight, hid them under her shawl, and walked out of the nursery with calm legs and burning ribs that eye in the courtyard. The king and queen sat on a high-carved stool, glowing in beads and joy. The priest began the naming chant. Ijeoma stepped forward and dropped to her knees. "My king," she said. "My queen, forgive me. The gods have tested us. I must speak in your hearing, and in the hearing of the earth." The courtyard became still. Ijeoma brought out the two babies, one from her left, one from her right. Two boys, one in the blue of royalty, one in plain cotton. The king stood so quickly his coral belt shook. "What is this? Someone has switched the queen's son," Ijeoma said, and hid another child in the nursery. A gasp passed through the crowd like harmattan across dry leaves. Women covered their mouths. Chiefs stared at the ground to avoid the wrath of a king. "Who?" the king asked, his voice low like the moment before rain hammers a roof. Ijeoma, blessed and loyal, looked up. "Give me time. I will find the hand," she said. "Not time," the head of council said softly. "We need the truth." The chief priest stepped forward and drew a circle of chalk on the floor. "The gods cannot lie." He said that a servant brought the ancestral bowl. It was white, old, and trusted. The chief priest placed two cowries inside, whispered words nobody else should know, and set the two infants on the mat before the circle. "Call your name, child," he intoned. "Call your blood. Choose your mother." He poured water in a thin stream. Cowries danced, stopped, and leaned, one toward the baby swaddled in the queen's blue cloth, and the other towards the baby in plain cotton. Silence stretched. The plain-wrapped baby, the real prince, turned his face toward Queen Amara and let out a small cry. Amara's hands trembled. Her breast milk began to wet the wrapper on her chest. Her body recognized her own. The crowd erupted, half with relief and half with fear. The king gathered the plain-wrapped child, his son, close. The chief priest lifted the chalk circle and wiped it with both hands, sealing the sign. "Find the one who did this," the king commanded. "Let the truth come to light." The palace was filled with tension. Guards locked the gates. Servants were lined up in rows. Every room was searched. The laundry hut was turned inside out. The kitchen fires were raked. The stable straw was scattered. Nkem kept her face smooth as a mirror. She stood in line, her shoulders low and her eyes down, but sweat drew a thin river behind her ear. The woman she had paid at the eastern gate never came because the guards had shut the city down before dawn. The reed basket she had prepared? It was already seized. Then Nurse Ijeoma came down to the line of maids. She sniffed their hands for goat milk smell. She checked their wrists for blue threads. She looked at their ankles for cut cowrie strings. When she reached Nkem, she paused. "Lift your wrapper," Nurse Igioma said. Kim lifted up her wrapper, and in it, a tiny bead gleamed, the bead that had fallen from the queen's blue wrapper when Kim unstitched it in the dark. She thought it was nothing, a mistake lost tonight. Nurse Igioma's voice did not rise as she asked, "Where did you get the queen's bead?" Kim's mouth became dry. She could not come up with any lies under old women's eyes. "Take her," Igioma said. 2 guards stepped forward. Kim did not struggle. She looked at her cousin, Queen Amara, her head high, her eyes full of sorrow that had not found speech, and for a moment, Kim saw the road she had chosen laid out in clean, cold daylight. They dragged her to the Hall of Oaths. The hall was cool and large, supported by pillars carved with fish, lions, and moons. In its center stood the oath stool, low and plain, older than silk. On one wall hung the Mirror of Rain, a polished bronze disc used to test hearts. The king, queen, council, chief priest, chiefs, and elders gathered. Guards closed the doors. "Kim," the king said, using her name like a knife you sharpen because you must. "You stand before the elders of Omalicha. Speak the truth and live. Speak lies and drown in them." Kim lifted her chin. "I did it," she said. "I swapped the queen's son." There were gasps everywhere, then low, angry murmurs. The head of council lifted a palm, and everywhere became calm again. "Why?" the king asked. "So that my cousin the queen will be thrown out of the palace, and a new wife would be chosen. And I, who have served in shadows for years, would shine. So that life would repay me at last." Her words were filled with scorn. The queen's eyes were filled with tears, but it did not spill. "What did I ever do to you, Kim?" she asked, heartbroken. "You were loved," Kim said. "That was enough reason to despise you." There was silence. The chief priest touched the Mirror of Rain. "Hold out your hands," he commanded. Kim obeyed. "Do you regret it?" the priest asked. Kim felt a strange thing. Her chest tugged like a rope. Regret scratched from inside. But pride pressed its knee on regret's neck. "No," she said. "I only regret that I failed." The mirror stayed dull. The king closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were tribunal clear. "Our laws are old and straight. You planned the death of a royal bloodline. You tried to break the kingdom's spine. But for the sake of the queen, who still calls you blood, we will not take your life." He turned to the council and asked, "What do you say?" The elders whispered in a tight circle. The head of council spoke up. "Banishment, your highness. She will be sent to Evil Marsh, to serve in the shrine that feeds travelers. A life of service, far from gold." The queen nodded once, slowly as she said, "Let it be so." Kim laughed, a dry sound. "You want to banish me? Because my cousin gave you a male child after how many years?" The priest frowned as he cautioned Kim, "Be careful with your words." The palace guards took Kim away in chains. Omalicha Kingdom returned to celebration. The king and queen held their true son, and the kingdom rejoiced. Yet something unsettling was brewing. At first, it was the small things. The queen slept lightly. The king walked longer in the evening court. The nurse checked the doors twice. The guards changed shifts more often, touching their cowrie belts with restless thumbs. Then, there came a rumor that would not die. 2 princes, the market women said. 2 boys were brought out before the chief priest. "Which one is which?" whispered women at the dye pits. "Was the chalk circle strong enough to decide which child is real?" murmured a soldier. The palace ignored the questions. The years moved by. Both boys, Ezeki the crown prince and Hugo, as the king named the other child in gratitude that he survived whatever night birthed him, grew side by side under the palace sun. They learned to read. They learned the drums for war and the drums for weddings. They learned the taste of dust and victory on the wrestling field. They learned to guide horses. They learned the ways of the elders and the smiles of the market. They were brothers without knowing. Ezeki had the king's steady gaze and the queen's tender mouth. Hugo had the queen's sharp thinking and the king's laugh. The queen loved both boys. The king favored both of them, and the people adored both of them. But a shadow followed them. The question nobody would voice out in daylight: which blood belongs to the throne? Banished to Eva Marsh, Kim spent her days feeding travelers who came out of the forest with hunger and dust. The shrine was a place of small mercies: water, fire, porridge, and mat. She cleaned pots. She scrubbed floors. She carried wood. Service can soften stone. It almost softened her. But bitterness isn't something that can easily be gotten rid of. At night, she sat by the marsh and spoke to the dark water. "If I had succeeded," she muttered, "Amara would have been gone by now, and I would have been walking through the palace corridors with bracelets singing." One season, a famine came. Travelers multiplied, and Kim's hands became weak. She learned the soft groan people make when the first taste hits an empty stomach after long hunger. She gave more than she kept. Strange peace began to seep into her like a slow river. That was when a merchant stopped at the shrine, a man who had sold brass to the palace. He rested, ate, and thanked Kim with news instead of coins, because news is a currency too. "The princes of Omalicha are growing strong," he said, his eyes bright. "But some people say that they look too alike." Kim listened. A hot conspiracy idea awoke in her. "Two princes," she repeated. "Yes," the merchant said. "One was born of the queen. One was found in the nursery. You have not heard? Long ago there was a swapping that happened in the palace." Something snapped in Kim, the last thin string tying her to peace. She stood up that night, packed a small bag, and began to walk back to Omalicha. When she reached Omalicha, the festival of masks had begun. The courtyard throbbed with drums. Masquerades leapt like wind caught in cloth. The two princes, tall now, wore crimson waistcloths and leopard skin straps. Coral flashed on their chests. Their hair was cut low and neat. Their cowries clicked at each stride. The king announced a contest, a rite of passage. The princes would race through the groves, solve the riddle stones, bring back the Omu leaf from the sacred hill, and return before the moon climbed 3 hand lengths. A wisdom trial. Kim slipped among the market women to watch. When the boys took off, the crowd roared. Hugo ran like a river, low and tireless. Ezeki ran like a drum, paced and sure. They vanished into the trees. Kim threaded after them, keeping to shadows she knew too well. In the grove of riddles, the boys parted ways, each taking a different path. Ezeki met a stone carved with a blind face which read, "I am the father of fathers and the child of children. I stand in your yard and on your tongue. Name me." He thought about it. Then he smiled. "Name," he said. The stone rolled aside. Hugo met a stone shaped like hunger, which read, "I eat and grow. Feed me and I die." He laughed softly and said, "Fire." The stone dissolved like ash and rain. They reached the hill almost together. The Omu leaves nodded like old men. Each prince plucked one. They turned to run back, and found Kim standing on the path, her shawl drawn, her eyes fierce and wet. "Children," she called, and both stopped. Listen to a woman's truth. Something in her voice reached them. "You are brothers, born on the same night of joy and sin," she said. "One of you is crowned by blood, the other crowned by accident." "Who are you?" Ezeki asked, the king's firmness in his tone. "The hand that broke your first morning," Kim said. "I swapped you, prince. I placed a market boy in your mother's lion cot." Their mouths opened and closed. "Why tell us now?" Hugo asked, his fingers white on his leaf. "Because lies rot," Kim said. "Because my bones rattle. Because the truth chased me in a dream and said, 'Speak before you become dust.' Because I looked for peace in service and it found me late. Because I am a coward who wants relief." The princes stared at her. Which one of us is the king's real blood? Ezeki asked, his voice almost steady. Nkem opened her mouth and screamed, not words, but pain. A hunter's snare sprung from the bush and wrapped her ankle. She fell, the trap's thorns biting like angry ants. Blood ran into the dust. Who set this? Hugo cried, dropping to help. Poachers, Ezeki hissed, cutting the leather with his knife. Run, Nkem gasped. Run, both of you. Finish the rite. Tell us first, Ezeki begged. Please. Nkem's fingers clawed the ground. She swallowed a sob. Aye. The hill boomed. A chunk of rock sheared and thundered down, shaken by distant drums and the weight of many feet climbing other paths. The boys dragged Nkem aside as stones crashed where she had lain. Dust gusted. Leaves flew. When the air cleared, Nkem's breath was thin. Her eyes were far. Go, she whispered. I will tell the king, if my breath allows. The princes hesitated, duty fighting with destiny. Then, they ran one last look each, before leaving. Nkem crawled to a tree and pressed her forehead to its root. Spirits, she muttered, carry me once more. The princes returned to the courtyard together, tired, the leaves held high, their eyes dark with storm. The people cheered. The king smiled at their unity. The queen's hands trembled with pride. Then Ezeki lifted his palm. Father, mother, stop the drums. A woman met us on the hill, a banished maid. She spoke of the old night when we were born. A hush fell like a cloth. The queen's face became pale. What did she say? The queen asked. That she swapped your son, Hugo said softly. That one of us is crowned by blood, while the other is crowned by accident. The courtyard exhaled. Chiefs looked at their feet. The king's jaw tightened. Fetch the chief priest, he said. Let the gods speak in the open. The chief priest came, older now, but steady. He drew a circle. The princes stepped in together, their shoulders almost touching. Call your mother, the priest intoned. Call your father. He poured water. The cowries danced. The stream sang. The bowl leaned. The cowries pointed to Hugo. A ripple ran through the crowd, low and stunned, even though many had expected shock. The queen's hand flew to her mouth. Not pain, not joy, but the raw sound that happens when a heart is both freed and broken. Hugo stood still, his face a storm over sea. Ezeki closed his eyes once, then opened them clear. The king stepped forward like a man walking into rain. He placed his right palm on Hugo's head, his left on Ezeki's shoulder. Blood, he said, his voice shaking. And bond. The chief priest raised his staff. The bowl has spoken. A few counselors, men with spit-slick tongues and coal hearts, smiled small smiles at the corner of their mouths. The king saw them and lifted his chin. Listen, we will not throw away a son because the truth arrived late. Ezeki has been crowned by duty and love, Hugo by blood and destiny. Two pillars will hold this house. Relief went through some, rage through others, confusion through many. The law had no page for this, and fate was not done. Trumpets blared at the eastern gate, panic music. A runner, dust white, burst into the court. Your Majesty, he cried. At the grove, a woman, the banished maid, was caught in a hunter's snare. She asked for the queen. She asked for the princess. She is dying. The queen stood up. Bring her immediately. They carried Nkem in on a mat. Blood dried brown on her leg. Her face was ash. Her eyes were almost out. The queen knelt beside her and took Nkem's hand. Nkem, Amara said, her voice breaking and gentle together. I am here. Nkem's lips trembled as she said, I wanted to be seen. I see you, the queen whispered. I have always seen you. Nkem's gaze slid to the princess. Forgive me, she breathed. If I had known what love would make of you, I would never, Her voice was swallowed by a cough that sounded like iron scraping a pan. She tried to lift her hand toward Hugo. You are the king's blood, she said, thin as a thread. Her fingers turned to Ezeki. "You are the king's work." Then her hand fell. Her chest sighed once, like a relieved house. Her eyes fixed on something kind and far. Silence stood, tall and final. The queen bowed her head over the body and wept, not just for betrayal, but for a girl who had wanted silk because she had known too much dust. The king closed Nkem's eyes with his thumb. "Bury her among the servants who save lives," he said. "Let no stone mock her. Let the story judge her fairly." The head of council shifted. "Your Majesty." "Enough," the king cut, quiet and iron. "We end curses here. But curses do not always end where kings choose." At night, the city woke to whispers like mosquitoes. "Blood has changed hands," the old men said at yellow lamps. "Who sits? Who bows? Who commands the gates?" In the barracks, a young captain sharpened his spear with a new rhythm. In the market, a widow counted coins twice. In the women's courtyard, two wives exchanged a look that was both relief and calculation. The next morning, the northern garrison did not open its gate at the first drum. At the third drum, it opened slowly, like an insult. On the fourth, a torch tossed by a careless hand found a dry patch in the storehouse. Flame climbed like gossip, hungry, fast, dancing like it did not understand the cost. By noon, fire licked the outer granaries. Smoke braided the sky. People ran with water pots in panic. The princes carried buckets shoulder to shoulder. The queen directed lines of women like a general blessed by mothers. The king shouted orders, his voice raw. The fire ate a roof, then two, leaping like old anger when given fuel. They contained it by dusk, but not before two granaries fell and 3 houses in the lower quarter were kissed to black. No one died, but the kingdom stood smelling of smoke and fear. The council gathered, faces masked by duty and designs. "The people need calm," one said. "They need clarity," another said, eyes on the princes. The king spoke to the crowd from the balcony. "We are still the Omalicha kingdom," he said. "Granaries can be rebuilt. Houses can be raised. Hearts can be held. We do not break because truth visits. We are not a pot for sale." People exhaled together. For a moment, the crack seemed to close. Then, as the moon rose, a messenger panted into the palace with a blood-marked stool from a northern village, the old sign that a faction had declared a rival claim. The messenger fell to his knees. "They demand a prince by blood. They ask Ezeki to stand down. They swear loyalty to Hugo alone." The court rippled with danger. Ezeki stepped forward before anyone could speak. His voice was clean. "I will not fight my brother. I will not let the kingdom tear itself. If exile is the price of peace, I choose the road." Ezeki, the queen, gasped. Hugo reached for his brother's arm, grip iron. "No," the king's voice broke. "My son, you will not bear the cost for a sin we did not commit." Ezeki met his father's eyes and the queen's trembling mouth. "You taught me service," he said. "Let me serve. Let blood sit on the stool. Let bond guard the door." He turned to Hugo and smiled, small and brave. "Rule well, brother." Hugo shook his head like a man refusing the night. "If the throne is mine by blood, it is ours by love. We hold it together. But time is a river with its own desire." Before agreement could be braided, the northern captains marched into the lower court with 50 men, armor neat, feet cruel, chanting, "Blood, blood, blood." The market followed with fear. Women clutched children. Men reached for spears. The air split. The king lifted both hands, but noise ate his voice. In the press, someone lost an arrow, no one saw who. It flew with that terrible clean sound arrows have when they mean to write history. It struck Ezeki. Not deep, but on the shoulder. He stumbled. The court screamed. Hugo caught him. The queen wailed. The king's eyes went full night. Guards surged. The captain stepped back, suddenly human. The chief priest shouted for calm, with a voice like thunder, trying to hold rain. Blood ran down Ezeki's arm, bright on coral. He looked at it, then at Hugo. "Brother," he said softly, almost surprised. "It seems fate insists on a mark." He did not fall. He stood, wounded and straight. He raised his uninjured arm toward the northern captains. "You will not make us enemies." The king found his voice. "Arrest the man who shot the arrow." They found no one. By sunrise, treaties had been whispered, names had been written. The kingdom chose a path, not with celebration, but with weary sense. Hugo would be declared crown prince by blood. Ezeki would be invested guardian of the gates, a title older than kingship, holding the army and the outer lands. They would stand together under the king's seal. The people accepted, some with joy, some with regret, all with the knowledge that peace is work. They buried Nkem on the western hill among servants who had saved lives, midwives, cooks who fed armies, and guards who died quietly. On her stone, the queen ordered 7 words which read, she wanted a crown, but found a mirror. That night, the queen lit a small lamp in the nursery and watched the lions carved on the cot. She touched the blue wrapper stitched with new beads. Tears came, slow and honest. The king entered and stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, steady, warm. "We will be remembered," she said, her voice small. "For what?" he asked. "For how we stayed," she replied. He nodded. "Then let us stay." Outside, the princes sat side by side on the courtyard step, saying nothing, sharing roasted plantain, listening to the night talk. Ezeki's shoulder was bound. Hugo's hands were restless, then still. "Brother," Hugo said at last. "Always," Ezeki answered. They did not promise perfection. They promised effort.